our bookish world traveler has returned to the US. Halley Sutton's here this week.
Hello, I'm so happy to be back with you.
I know, I'm so excited. I was like, every time you posted something, I was like a Taylor Swift fan. I was like, ooh, what are all the pictures mean?
I know, and I have like 6,000 pictures from my trip, and that's like only slightly exaggerated. And I'm trying to
I
figure out,
believe it.
I think I might try to like put together like a digital scrapbook with some
Oh
commentary
yeah.
about stuff. And then that way I can kind of be like, if you're interested, you can
Mm-hmm.
look here versus me being like, I don't know what
That
to
would be
post.
cool.
Yeah.
I would
So
look through it.
watch for that maybe in a
Yeah.
future Halley Sutton newsletter.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. So it looked like you had a pretty good time. Like it looked like you were having fun.
So I had the most amazing time. So this was a trip of a lifetime. I went to Egypt and Jordan, and I saw many of the highlights of Egypt. I definitely want to go back. I think one
Mm.
place that like is really intriguing to me is Alexandria, and I didn't get to go there. And that's founded by Alexander the Great, has like where Cleopatra most likely had her palace, the famous Library of Alexandria that burned, just like a seed of a lot of like old ancient world things. So here's the thing, I don't know if you know about me, but I was obsessed with ancient Egypt as a kid. I my favorite book that I read as a kid was a book called Mara, Daughter of the Nile by Eloise Jarvis
Yes.
McGraw. And it's just this like great historical. I mean, they say some pretty slanderous things about Egypt's first female pharaoh, which I'm like, from a 2024 lens, I don't love, but
Yeah.
I loved that book. I wanted to be an Egyptologist until I figured out there was like no jobs for it. I mean, there
Right.
are jobs, but like wasn't going to be me. Um, and so this was really like the trip. And I saw the movie The Mummy like 17 times in theaters. And that's
Oh
only,
yeah.
that may not be an exaggeration, actually. Like I was a
Probably not.
significant chunk of the box office. So going to Egypt is something I have always wanted to do. I felt very lucky to get to do it. I went with my parents. So it was really wonderful to
Oh,
experience
that's
that.
cool.
Yeah. To experience that trip of a lifetime with them too.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a few little like highlights to share
Yeah.
if that's cool.
Go for it.
Okay, so first thing I will say is we chose an aggressive time of year to go. We got there August 26th and left
Mhm.
September 10th. And in Cairo, which is where I flew into, it was like 100 degrees. Um, yeah, but don't worry, it'll get hotter
It
as
got
the
hotter.
story progresses. Yeah. So flew into Cairo. I got to see this beautiful mosque that was, dated to the 12th century. I saw the pyramids. I rode a camel. I saw the Great Sphinx. There's several pictures of me looking very frightened on a camel because the camel and I not copacetic,
Oh no.
just very, but like very cool. They're amazing animals. They're so weird
Mhm.
looking too. It's like, what's this like horse that
Yeah.
had sex with an ostrich thing?
Yes.
Um, so we were in Cairo for a few days. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm having allergies.
Oh, you're fine. Me too.
It's the time of year when Los Angeles is on fire. So,
Yeah.
there's just weird stuff in the air constantly.
Oh,
So then we were in Cairo for a few days, flew down to Luxor, which is the ancient city of Thebes. And that's kind of really at the Nile Delta. So it's like we were in the Greater Sahara, kind of next to with Cairo, and then you move kind of into like the lush valley of the Nile. So everything's green, looks very oasisy. And in Luxor, it was 115 degrees. So that was pretty brutal, especially because it's
oh,
not like you're walking around and doing stuff. You're climbing through these beautiful ancient temples that are 3,500 years old and just sweating, just like
dripping.
dripping sweat.
Yeah.
So I won't go through the entire trip because we would be here for the next 14 hours, but a few of the highlights that I wanted to share was I
Yeah.
got to go to the Valley of the Kings, which is the ancient burial site for
Mhm.
many of the pharaohs. And so when I was there, I saw King Tut face to face, which was pretty crazy because
That
they've
is
left him in the Valley
wild.
of the Kings. It was crazy. It was amazing. And
Crazy.
he's buried in this tiny little, his burial chamber was tiny because he was, I think, only 19 when he died, so they didn't expect him to
Oh,
die.
yeah.
So they didn't get to build his whole beautiful tomb. But
Ah,
there's also speculation that he was assassinated, and so part of that is that like the person who succeeded him, which was his high priest, took what was going to be his burial tomb. He married his widow and he was like, and I'm king now. So it doesn't paint a
wow.
great picture of,
No.
no.
Poor,
So that
poor
was
Tut.
amazing. I know, right? And so poor Tut saw him face to face, still looking good, 3,000 years old, looking pretty good.
That's
um
crazy.
Maybe needs a little moisturization, but maybe not.
Right.
Um, and then we went to, so in the Valley of the Kings, like one of the most preserved tombs is this Seti the First. And Seti the First was the father of Ramses the Great, who is kind of like, if you know one pharaoh, that's probably who you know.
Mhm.
Biblically, he's the pharaoh who was pharaoh with Moses. He
Mm.
was called the builder. He built a bunch of the like great temples and different things that are still standing today. He also lived to be 91, which is fucking nuts considering
Wow.
ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so this is his father.
Mhm.
I'm not kidding, Kate. So you go down like 300 steps down
Mhm.
into the earth.
Wow.
No air conditioning, obviously. That's me
Right.
being facetious, but there's no ventilation. So it's really hot down there. And
Oh,
it's just like, I have lived in almost every apartment I've ever lived in has been smaller than this burial chamber. That is just like 5 or 6 different massive rooms. Everywhere
wow.
you look, there's carvings and hieroglyphics. And
Mm.
it would have been filled like to the roof with the treasure that he would need in the afterlife. That so it would just be
Right.
like golden chariots, his crowns, all of this stuff there that's all been looted and robbed, but it was incredible.
Yeah.
So that was like a life-changing experience for me getting to see
I
that.
bet. I would
What
probably
you
have died of
Oh,
asthma.
yeah, it was, and my dad did get a little bit of heat stroke coming back up from that one because it
Oh,
was
yeah?
so brutal. Yeah, he got a little sick,
Mhm.
which was not great, but he's fine, listeners.
That's good.
But yeah, and so then after the Valley of the Kings, we went over and saw Queen Hatshepsut's temple. She was the
Mhm.
first female pharaoh in Egypt. Basically, so Egypt had a custom of um, no better way to say it, but incest, of half brothers and half sisters would marry each other, basically to consolidate the power line. So she's
Mhm.
married to her half brother. They have children. Her half brother dies. She becomes the queen regent for her son, who's like 2, and then basically is like, you know what? I think I should rule. And actually, they had a very prosperous, peaceful reign under Queen Hatshepsut.
Yeah.
But when her successor came of age, he like chiseled her face and name off of everything. So her temple is one of the few places where you can still see like the glory of her reign and what she wanted for
Wow.
herself. And she's the only woman to be buried in the Valley of the Kings, because future female queens or pharaohs were all buried in the Valley of the Kings, or
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Valley of the Queens. So she's
Mm,
buried in the
mhm.
Valley of the Kings, has this massive temple, and she's buried like underneath the temple into the rock side. Just the feats of engineering were really
Yeah.
crazy. Um, so then we traveled further south down the Nile, which was such a dream to be, Agatha Christieing it up on,
Right.
you know, on a Nile boat. Um,
Mhm.
we stopped at one temple that was dedicated to Sobek, who is the crocodile god, is also kind of the god of like physicians and healthcare.
Mm.
But what that meant was that in the temple itself in ancient Egypt, they always kept a live crocodile, being like the living version of the god. So just like in the middle of the temple, there's a live crocodile, and we know
Mhm.
this because there's a bunch of mummified crocodiles that they found buried behind the temple. So you go into this
Whoa.
museum next to the temple and there's just all these ancient mummified crocodiles. How crazy is that?
That is wild.
I
I didn't
know.
know crocodiles were mummified anywhere.
I didn't either. It was amazing. So that was the Temple of Kamambo, which was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and then one last thing I want to share about Egypt, which again, I could talk about this for days, but I'm trying to
Hmm.
just hit some of the highlights. Um, we flew back. So we flew all the way. We took the boat all the way down to Aswan in the south. We went to Abu Simbel, which is this beautiful temple that Ramses had carved for himself and one for his favorite of his 32 wives, Nefertari.
Hmm.
But there, it's beautiful. It's like one of the ancient wonders of the world. Then flew back to Cairo for like a day or two. Our Egyptologist told us this, and I have not done the legwork to verify if this is true or not. But
Hmm.
what is true is that he told us Cairo has the oldest or the largest cemetery in the world. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I will
Hmm.
say that like if you're driving across Cairo, there's like a 4 or 5 mile stretch where it's just cemetery on either side of you. So you're
Wow.
like in the highway and then there's cemeteries on either side. And the way that these cemeteries work is that people are buried pretty quickly in Egypt when they pass.
Uh-huh.
But then their family members will build rooms on top of their graves, basically where they can go, pay their respects. And I think it's partially pragmatic
Okay.
because of the heat. So it's basically like a structure so
Mm.
you're not just standing out in the sun. But what is
Yes.
crazy about this is that in the 90s, 80s and 90s, when the housing market collapsed in Egypt, people started moving into these rooms in the cemetery. So at one
Well,
point, there were 700,000 people living in the cemetery in Cairo, and they called it the Living City of the Dead, which is a great title for a book.
totally.
And
Totally. Yeah.
so you'll be driving past these cemeteries and you'll see that they've also built the infrastructure of a city within the cemetery. So it'll be like tombs, 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 tombs. There's a school, there's a soccer field, there's a hospital, tombs, 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 and it's within the cemetery itself, which is crazy. And so
Wow.
at some point, one of the presidents of Egypt basically said, like, we're not doing this anymore. So he
Oh,
made most of the people leave, but there are
yeah.
still, they think, about 2 to 3 thousand people who live in the cemetery in Cairo. How crazy is that?
That is wild. I'm looking
Yeah.
at pictures of it right now because I'm like, my brain can't even come up with it. And then you're like, oh, okay. This is just how they're living.
And it really just does look like kind of like
Yeah.
dwellings. Like it's really
Yeah.
like if you didn't know that was a cemetery, you'd be like, oh, it's like a low rent housing district or something,
Yeah.
because they're not
Yeah.
super sophisticated. They're not like high rises, but like you can tell that they're
Right.
like structures. And so,
That
yeah,
is crazy.
I know. He told me
It's
that, and
historical, I guess.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And my spooky little brain went into overdrive and was like, can I write a book about that? Just
Oh my
like, I don't know that
gosh.
I'm the right person to do it, but like that it would be an
I
amazing, I would love to read
know.
it. So,
Yes. Like
yeah.
what's taking place in like the little micro communities.
Totally. And also like
Yeah.
plenty of spooky potential.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well,
So then
someone can write it if we don't write it.
right. Somebody pick that idea up.
Yeah.
So then from Cairo, we flew over to Jordan. And while I was in Jordan, I got to see the
Hmm.
Dead Sea and Petra, which was amazing. I also got stopped by the antiquities police as I was trying to fly out of Jordan for this little number,
Oh
a little
no.
stone scarab, which is very cool,
Yeah.
which is definitely not ancient, but they were a little worried it might be, which I get. Like,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
want to protect the
You're like, it's
antiquities.
not. Yes.
Uh-oh.
Oh, can you not hear me?
My internet is being slow. Hold on one second.
Oh, you're good. There you are.
Yay. Okay,
Yeah.
I can hear you. Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Cool. Yeah, so I got stopped for my little stone scarab souvenir, and they took my passport away for a few minutes, and I was like, "Oh no, do I live in Jordan now?" But then it was totally fine.
That's good. Oh,
Yeah,
that would be nerve-wracking though.
yeah, it was a little bit. I was sort of like, "Oh, there's a big language
Yeah.
barrier here."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. That's what's always scary about because that shows up in thrillers. Like when you're in another country and something bad goes down and you're like, I don't know what to do here.
Totally, right? Like, yeah, we get so used to I mean, I think we all think that our way of life is the default way of life, and traveling really
Mhm.
like puts you up against that idea of like, nope,
Yeah.
there's tons of ways, and just because you're used to doing it one way doesn't mean it's right. And you're like, oh no.
Right? Not everybody wants to know that or hear that, but
Right.
I agree.
Totally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you were there, was that 3 weeks then? 2, 3
It was
weeks?
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 solid
Nice.
weeks. And then basically like 24 hours of travel to get home. Um,
Oh,
but yeah, it was the most amazing experience
that's so
probably
cool.
of my life. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. Because you like wanted to since you read that book, right? Like you
Mm.
basically wanted to at least visit.
Oh yeah, I read Mara Daughter of the Nile, and then I became obsessed with Egyptian history, so read everything I could get my hands on. Tried to teach myself how to read hieroglyphics. Didn't go great, but like I tried. As a kid, I had this like terrible habit. I'm a teacher's daughter, and like this is where it maybe
Mm.
shows up, is like I guess the homework that my teacher was assigning wasn't enough. And maybe this is just like the seed of being a future writer and like wanting something to do with your brain all day. But I would like assign myself projects. And so I would be
Yes.
like, okay, this month we're going to learn everything we can about like Cleopatra. And then I would write up little
Yeah.
reports and give them to my teacher to grade. And she finally called home and was like, please, like, your daughter is making extra work for me. We didn't assign this. I don't want it. Like,
Oh my
I have a
God.
life. I
That's
can't just be reading
horrible.
like things she's turning in. And my mom was like, we got to get you a few more hobbies.
Right? Oh my gosh, that's so cute though. That
Thank
you were
you.
even taking it to her.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I would like a gold star and an A. Thank you.
You're like, more gold stars, please. Look what I
Yes,
can do.
exactly.
I feel you there. I feel you on that one. Mine was like, I mean, obviously I'm not trying to say this to sound like, I never want to sound like overly intellectual because people are so annoying in that realm sometimes,
Mm.
but my second grade teacher started giving me separate spelling tests
Ooh,
because everything was so easy for me.
look
So
at
she gave me
you.
harder ones so I could learn more words, and I was like, hoo, and everyone was
I
like,
love
but
that.
it's harder, and I'm like, I don't know, it's fun.
Yeah, totally. Did you
Hmm.
ever participate in spelling bees?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I won. I don't think I
You were
did though.
robbed. You were
I was
robbed.
robbed.
We need a recount.
Yeah. Yeah, probably actually because I was the salutatorian. It actually probably was the valedictorian who
Mhm.
beat me.
Salutatorian, look
School.
at you. Go girl.
Yeah, I'm I'm bookish all around and schoolish.
Yeah, I get it. Those things often
Yeah.
go hand in hand.
Yeah, typically. Did you read anything while you were on vacation?
Yes, I did. So I don't know
Nice.
about you, but like one
Hmm.
of the great joys of travel for me, like I don't care
Yeah.
about the clothes I pack, like whatever, like just pack something.
Mm-hmm.
I sit there and do like a Hunger Games esque, like, or like, I guess maybe like basketball March Madness bracket of which books I'm going to
Mm.
bring. Like, I start with like 20 and I'm like, okay, this one or this one. And I like let it marinate for weeks. Like, I have thought before that I should do some sort of TikTok content about it because it is like a little bit
You probably
ridiculous, but
should.
I really should.
Yeah.
But I think I brought 8 books, which was aggressive. I will say that was
It
aggressive
is.
for a 2 week trip. But I think I read like 6 of them. So I got pretty close. But,
Wow.
well, I mean, I had a couple of really long flights where,
Oh, that's
you
true.
know, wasn't a lot to do besides stare straight ahead at a movie or a book.
Yeah.
So I would say 3 big highlights. Actually, 4 of the books that I
Mm.
read were really excellent. I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore.
Oh, I want to read it. I just have not fit it in.
It's so good.
Okay,
And
so I have to read it.
you've got to read it. It's so good.
Hmm.
She's such a good writer. The characters are so interesting. She does some
Mm.
really interesting stuff with perspective. Um, I I actually don't think I'd read any of her books before, even though her last book, Long Bright River, won the Edgar a couple of years ago. And she's somebody
Hmm.
who I like know of and have a lot of respect for. Um, but I hadn't read any of her work before, and I read God of the Woods, and it just like floored me. It was so good.
Yeah.
So the premise of that one, just kind of briefly, is this rich family owns this plot of land that runs a summer camp for kids every year, kind of like a survival camp. Like they're supposed to learn skills to like survive in the woods. And one year, their teenage daughter Barbara attends the summer camp and goes missing from the summer camp. And what's odd about that, so there's this forward narrative of like, where's Barbara? Are we going to find her? What happened to her? There's all these things that happened the last night she was there, and you're kind of getting all these perspectives, piecing it together. But the piece that makes it really kind of crazy and bizarre is that Barbara's older brother Bear went missing like 15 years before and has never been recovered. And so it's this sort of like, how do these two mysteries relate to each other? How do they play into each other? What's going on there? And it's just so
everybody who reads it loves it.
So good. And like, it's one of those books where, I don't know about you, but like sometimes when a book gets so much hype, there's a part of me that's resistant to it. Kind of like, okay, I know it's going to be great. I get it. And then I read it and I was like, fuck, it really is great though. Like, it really is.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I read that one.
And Chris Whitaker's is the other one that is it All the Colors of the Dark?
Yes, which I also haven't read.
I haven't either. I need to.
We should do a podcast episode. You can cut this out if you want, but we should do a podcast episode of all the big hype books we haven't read.
That's a really good idea. Yeah,
we should do that sometime.
Next one. I like that idea. I love that.
I like that too.
I love that. We'll totally do that. Because I think, and the reason I pair those two together too is they're both like 500-page books.
Totally.
So I didn't get it on NetGalley. I didn't get either of them. And so I've just been having to read for interviews. And otherwise I'm like, I don't know if I can read 500 pages before my next book.
Totally. No, I get that. They're investments. They're big investments, but it's really good.
Yeah. I want to read it.
Yeah. And so then let's see. I also read the book What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez, which is a little more, there's mystery elements to it. It's a little more, I think it was pitched as Death on the Nile meets The Mummy, and has like a little bit of like supernatural elements to it. And it's about this young woman who her parents are Egyptologists, and they leave her for 6 months out of every year in Buenos Aires, where she's grown up, to go to Egypt and to explore and excavate. And on one of their missions, she finds out they've both died, and no one can tell her what happened or why, just that they're dead. And so she decides she's going to go to Egypt. And I think it's set in like the 1890s. She's going to go to Egypt and find out what happened to them. And it's YA, and it's got some romance in it, which I found very enjoyable. It was just very enjoyable. And it was very fun to be reading it as I was myself making a very similar journey. So that was really cool. And it was just really fun. And I would say I really enjoyed the book, but I wasn't sure if I was going to read the next book in the series. And then there's like a last page mic drop where I was like, well, okay, I guess I'm reading the next book. Like, it was so like, oh my God. Yeah. How often does that happen? That happens to me very rarely.
Oh yeah. Same. Yeah. Because a lot don't have like true cliffhangers at the end.
Totally. And I was like, and it just like upended my full understanding of what had happened in the book before in a way that was like very satisfying and very like, okay, now what? Yeah.
That is exciting.
Yeah. So highly recommend that one. And I think the sequel, something,
what did you say it was called again?
What the River Knows.
What the River Knows.
Yes, and there's a sequel coming out, I believe this month actually, and it's something like Hidden in the Library or something, some reference to a library, which I think is the Library of Alexandria, but
nice.
We'll find out. I also got to read my ARC. Everybody be super jealous.
Ooh, yeah.
Of the Favorites by Lane Fargo, which if you don't know, why don't you know? But it's
How
great.
don't
It's
you?
it is a retelling of Wuthering Heights set in the world of ice dancing, and it's very emotional and sweeping, takes place over the course of like 20 years, and
Wow.
is kind of this like melodramatic, passionate romance between Kat and Heath Rocha, and they're both pair skaters and how they come together, and it's about ambition and artistry and love and like what actually brings us everlasting nourishment. It's really
Wow.
great, a really fun read, very like soap opera-y and
Mm,
in the best way,
yeah.
and dramatic and fun.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
Yeah,
excited. I
it's so
have
good.
it, but I'll probably read it closer to pub date. I have it on NetGalley, but
That's totally fair.
I'm so
And
tempted.
it's long. It's a beast too. It is a long
Yeah.
book, but it is it flies by for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's great.
Did you
Um
see I got my Ashley Winstead arc?
oh, you did. This book will bury me.
Yes.
Okay, I just finished that last week and it's so good and I
Oh,
can't
you
wait
read
to
it
hear what you
already?
think about it. Oh, I read it already. I got the
Wow.
PDF of it. So, yeah, cuz I'm going to blurb it and which maybe
So
look
it's
at how
so
beautiful. It's
beautiful.
a stunner.
I know. It's
Oh my
so
gosh.
pretty.
And it's
This is one where I'm
good.
really torn because we scheduled an interview for February,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I want to have read it fresh then, but I don't know if I can wait that long.
I get it, and I loved it. I
Yeah,
like I love all of Ashley's work. There isn't a book of hers that I've read that I haven't been obsessed with. But
right.
this book is just really something special. And
Yeah.
she does some very tricky things. Like it's sort of meta. It's like
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know how to explain it and I don't want to give anything away, which is something I
Yeah.
want to talk about when we talk about the movie that I also want us to talk
Oh my
about, which
gosh,
is
I
like
know.
how do you discuss something without being like there's a twist here, which primes an audience to like
I know.
look for something. But like she does some really
Yes,
cool meta stuff within the book about like true
that is.
crime and writing true crime, and just like
Oh, that
God,
is
I want to
so
live in her
cool.
brain. Yeah.
I know. I know. I'm so excited to read it. I'll because it's like I also could read it early and write my questions
Hmm.
after I read it and then just keep them until the interview. So we'll see.
It'll be I don't envy you. It's a tough one to decide if
I
like you
know.
want to read it early
Yeah.
or not.
Mhm.
Um so and then I read one other book that I want to squeal about a little bit, which
Yeah.
is a nonfiction book, and it came out years ago, and it was a big book when it came out, but I hadn't read it yet. But there's going to be a TV show on Hulu made inspired by the book coming out, I
Oh.
think either this month or next. And it's called Say Nothing, A True Story of Memory and Murder in Northern Ireland by Patrick Radden Keefe. Um,
Wow.
and it is about the Troubles in Ireland, the long-standing conflict, which I knew the broad strokes of. Like, I'm a fan
Mhm.
of the TV show Dairy Girls, and was sort of like, all right, like I
Mhm.
understand this history from this lens, but goes
Yeah.
much more in depth into it and what was at stake and some of the history, particularly of the more recent part of the conflict. But it does it through the lens of this woman who is kind of an infamous murder victim of the
Mhm.
Troubles, went missing for a long time, would not be confirmed murdered for a long time. She had 10 children and was basically yanked out of her home, and her kids never saw her again.
Oh my
And
god.
it's like, what happened to Jean McConville? And so he uses this kind of her as the jumping off point to like give you a fuller picture of this history. And it is
Mhm.
so good. If you like nonfiction, if you like historical and true crime, it is just like impeccably researched, impeccably
Mm.
written, very complex, nuanced subject that's treated that way, where you come out of it not necessarily feeling like anybody's clean. And it's just
Yeah.
was like so good. I loved
Mhm.
it.
You got me wanting to read nonfiction. I actually the other arc I got that I'm definitely gonna read nonfiction is Marsha Clark wrote
Ooh.
a nonfiction trial by ambush about a woman who was
Ooh.
like wrongly accused of a crime. And it was like this publicist I work with, they sent me and they were like, would you be interested? And I'm like, I'm reading nonfiction. That's what's
Yeah.
gonna happen if I can talk to Marsha Clark.
I know. That's what I was just going to ask. Are you going to get to interview her?
Yes.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And I just got that arc too. And it's
Yeah,
so
let's
great.
see it. Look at that.
Murder, Injustice, and the Truth About the Case of Barbara Graham. Trial by
Ooh.
Ambush.
I'm writing that down. I'm looking that
It
one
comes
up.
out November 12th.
Okay. Wow, wow,
Just been getting
wow.
all the arcs this week.
Look at you.
I just got Danielle Trusoni's one, the puzzle box.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Let me know what you think of that.
I know, I will. It's the next one I'm going to read.
Ooh.
So I'll know soon.
Okay, so on that note,
Mm-hmm.
do you find yourself, we're now officially, it's October 2nd when we're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's officially fall, spooky season
Mm-hmm.
is in the air. Do you feel like you change what you read seasonally or like what you're drawn to? I know you're also reading so much for the podcast and for different things
Right.
that it's kind of dictated by arcs, but I'm just curious if you like notice
Mm-hmm.
a shift in your reading with the seasons, because I definitely do.
So I would say probably like I read like 15% more, or like I'm like 15 to 20% more likely to read like dark academia or something that's a little horror-y. And so I think I can't remember. Oh, I did talk about this on the podcast like 3 weeks ago, but why can't I think of her last name? Alexis Henderson has a book coming out called Academy for Liars,
Oh,
something like that.
yes.
And I loved it. It is like
Okay.
this really cool blend of dark academia, horror for sure. There's psychological magic and like bad magic and like action all taking taking place on this secret campus that is like encapsulated in magic in Savannah. So like nobody knows about it except the people that get invited to it. So she gets invited. I was obsessed. Like it is a bloody, like gritty, dark academia thriller, and it was so good. So
That sounds amazing.
that one was like I read it in September, but I was because it comes out in October, and I feel like that is like I would read more books like that in the fall for sure. So like I just read her book House of Hunger, which is also really good, and it's like historical fantasy, not even fantasy. It's it's historical something like gothic historical thriller, where basically living in a society where people have blood maids, and so they like drink their blood, but it's like you can go from living on the streets to like being incredibly wealthy just because you let wealthy people drink your blood. It's
Wow.
such a fun concept. And so it
Okay.
was just wild and out there, and the cover's really cool, and the cover's very spooky. So I do think I read like more of that in general, but I'm not someone who like I can still read a summer thriller right now. And
For sure.
in the summer sometimes I read a winter thriller and I'm like, thank God, at least in my fictional world it's cold.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So how about you?
Yeah, I do the same thing too. Where again, it's like it's not like I only read seasonally, but I do notice that yeah, especially in the fall. I guess with the summer books too, like summer thrillers, like I do sometimes feel drawn to like things that have that sort of like heated poolside feel.
Yeah.
But then in the fall, I'm like definitely dark academia. I'm also really drawn to like British stuff, which I guess is my version of it. I was kind of pulling out some books from my shelves, being like, I think I want to read these in the next few weeks. And one that popped up was Agatha Christie. I don't remember the title. It's her really famous, the one that she famously pulls off again a twist with. let me look it up because it'll drive me crazy. But then another one was one about the Yorkshire Ripper, like a nonfiction account. Like for some reason, my version of fall is like, oh, time to go to England. You know, I don't know what that's about, but
I get it though. Like it makes me think of Broadchurch. I don't know if you watched that on Netflix.
Yes.
That's like a fall vibe.
Yes. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is the one that I pulled from my shelf that I want to read this fall.
Nice.
And then I have this feeling, I have this like pet suspicion, and I'm sure somebody will be like, yeah, other people have written about this at length. I think dark academia partially comes out of, I mean, you could trace the roots older. Like I think The Secret History by Donna Tartt is probably one of like the big ones. But I also think part of the reason it's become such a hit is that it's like all the kids who grew up with Harry Potter are now adults and want to return to that like Hogwarts dark atmosphere, but like from a more adult lens. That's what I think is going on with dark academia.
I think I've got to agree with you, because when I was talking about Academy for Liars, like for the first time, I was telling people, I was like, it actually is a lot like, it's a Harry Potter concept, but like rated R.
Totally. That's what it sounded like when, yeah. And I wrote it down because I need to read that. That sounds right up my alley.
Oh, I think you'll love it. It was so good and so atmospheric. She's talented.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to her next week.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting. Very cool.
Yeah. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I wrote down House of Hunger too, so I can't wait. I'll read them and report back.
It's fun.
Yeah. That
House
also
of
makes
like 280 pages, so.
Oh, nice. Quick jaunt. Mentioning dark academia, I want to squeal about something that I think you probably saw the news about, which is that Society of Lies by Lauren Ling Brown is Reese Witherspoon's book club pick. I was so excited for her.
I am so happy for her. That was so I like tagged her in a reel and she DM'd me and she was like, oh my God, in 30 minutes they're going to announce that it's a Reese book club pick. And I was like, what? And I was like, I hope this is going to be one of the ones that she turns into a TV show. And I was like, every episode could switch between the perspectives.
It would be so cool. Yeah. Honestly, we should get you in the development room because it sounds
That's what she said. She was like, I hadn't even thought of that. Like, yeah, we need to do that.
Yeah. I'm so excited for her. It's such exciting news. So great. And I get to do a live conversation with her on Friday. So I'm really excited about that too. So that'll be fun.
Oh, I love that you guys are like also little besties.
Yeah, we went to lunch 2 days ago. I know, we're making a little triangle.
I'm gonna make it out there eventually.
Yes, you better. I'm gonna do all the like I'm gonna take
that or Austin or Houston. There are like tons of thriller authors there too.
That's very true. I think Amy Gentry lives in Austin. Among other people. But yeah, if you come out to California, to LA, I will take you on like my spooky cemetery tours and we'll go see where Toto the dog is buried. It'll be great.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It will be so fun. It's gonna happen. We don't know when, but it's gonna happen.
But it will, for sure. Yes.
It will.
And then I'll be like, which books did you pack?
I know. And I'm like, my phone, it has all of them.
Yeah, exactly. I have a library, Hallie. Get into the 21st century.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We'll make it happen for sure.
For sure.
Well, I read a couple here recently that were very fun.
Oh, do tell.
This one, not that I have two, but like, not that you shouldn't read the other one too, but like this one is like, it has such a similar tone to The Lady Upstairs meets Dexter.
Okay.
But it was reminding me of that. Okay, so it's called This Girl's a Killer. It's by Emma C. Wells. You may have seen some of her brilliant marketing of it.
I have, yes.
Yeah. So she built a whole real life size like Barbie box for this book and has been taking it to different conferences. I think, but is it Boucher or Boucher Con?
Boucher Con.
Boucher. It's neither.
I know it should be like Boucher Con, I think, but like everybody just says Boucher
We're in
Con.
America. Yeah. So I think that was the first one she took it to, but people can definitely go. I think she's Emma C. Wells' author. I can't totally remember, but she's on Instagram. You'll be able to find her. But she built a whole Barbie box and has been doing like press with it. I'm like, this is brilliant. So I'm at like 60%, so I'll probably just read the synopsis so that I don't spoil anything.
Yes.
But meet Cordelia Black. Cordelia loves exactly 3 things: her chosen family, composed of her best friend Diane and her goddaughter, her hairdresser, worth every penny plus tip, and killing bad men. By day, she's a successful pharmaceutical rep with a pristine reputation and a designer wardrobe. By night, she's culling South Louisiana of unscrupulous men, monsters who always seem to evade justice until they meet her. It's a complicated yet fulfilling life that requires complete and total control at all times. But when the evening news starts throwing around the word serial killer, pressure heightens for her in the South, and it's only exacerbated when Diane starts dating a man Cordelia is sure is not a good person, someone who might unravel everything Cordelia has worked for with her found family. Soon Cordelia's world spirals, and that is not an exaggeration. Her world is falling apart at the point that I'm in, and she loses her grip on those tightly held threads that keep her safe. It is blowing my socks off. And I don't use that term, and that's just what came to my mind.
I love that. That sounds so up my alley also. Like, that sounds great. Very They Never Learn by Lane Fargo too.
That
like,
too.
It has yes. Yeah.
Very much. It's kind of cool too, because it's making me realize, like, I think I just hadn't thought of Dexter in a while since I watched it so long ago, but I'm like, Dexter's snarky.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of it, and I was like, he is a really good example of a snarky male character. I always think of it with females, but like, it's so cool because like everything that's actually happening and the details of her life are nothing like Dexter's life. But it's not just that she's like killing bad people. It's also like her inner monologue is the kind of fun that you have listening to like Dexter's inner monologue throughout this.
I totally get that.
It's so good.
Like, I think at the part of the reason those thrillers are so successful and that I think they're so fun for people is that you get to be like an avatar into this like snarky, bitchy, murderous that you would never, none of us aspire to be that in real life, really, but like that it like allows you to live in this way that is like outside of who you would normally be. And I think that's so fun.
Yes. It's really good. I was like truly trying to like keep my eyes open last night so I could try to finish it, but I just can't. I wish I could get so into a book that I would stay up all night. Like, I'm fine sacrificing sleep, but I can't. I fall asleep.
We're older now, you know, like I could do that when I was like 15 and now I'm like,
that's a good point. That's good. My brain's like, no, we need to stop for today.
Right, exactly. Like, it's night time. We're done.
Yeah. The other one though is this really cool story. So, have you read The Astrology House by Corinne Jade?
No.
Okay. So I hadn't either. I remember seeing it. It came out in July. I remember seeing it like a bunch on the feeds, but I just like hadn't requested it, and a lot of people were just giving it pretty good reviews. But anyway, so cool podcasting crossover story. I had Chelsea Beaker, who wrote Mad Woman, on the podcast. And then I was following her, and then she shared she was on this podcast called Pop Fiction Women, and I was like, that title sounds like someone I need to follow.
Totally.
So I followed their podcast, and it's Corinne and Kate. They're 2 co-hosts together, and they like cover fiction, whether it's books, TV shows, movies that women write or produce or are in charge of. And part of the reason they do that, because then I got obsessed and I went to their website and had to read everything about them. Their about section is that Corinne was listening to something after Gone Girl came out, and it was like a 2-hour conversation about it. And these podcasters were talking about how great Ben Affleck was and how great the direction was from David. Thank you. I almost said Flincher, and I was like, that's not right.
Honestly, that's like a spookier version of his name, though. I like it.
And she was like, so I listened to 2 hours of it, and literally not once did we talk about Gillian Flynn, who wrote the book, who adapted the screenplay, who like was nominated for her screenplay. Didn't talk about her, didn't talk about Amy Dunn, like just didn't even touch on any of that. And she was so mad that she called her friend up and she was like, do you want to do a podcast with me where we talk about things that women create? And I'm like,
Yes.
That is the coolest origin story ever.
That really is. And like, how do you talk about Gone Girl without talking about like this central woman experience of it, where like that to me is part of what makes that book so powerful. It's why, like, it's, first of all, it's a great story. It's really well written, but it's also like Amy Dunn's cool girl speech is iconic for a reason. And it really gets to the heart of like these dynamics that like women experience. And I think that's why it resonated with so many people, besides being such a great story. Like, how do you talk about that without mentioning
That's what
things?
I said to her too. I was like, especially that movie, like that movie, we're not talking about any of the women involved.
Right. And there's plenty of like male fronted media, plenty that you could be like, yeah, I guess we're not talking about the women part of it, which is like bullshit anyway. But like, you know what I mean? But like, how do you talk about Gone Girl without talking about the women?
I somehow, whoever that was, did. And so now we have Pop Fiction Women, though, which is really fun to listen to. So
awesome. I would check it out.
Yeah. So I started following them, and then I was like, oh, I remember seeing her name everywhere in a book. So Corinne Jade wrote The Astrology House that came out this July, and I loved it. It was very cool. This one, I think I can probably give the gist of it without giving any spoilers, but basically it is a like really pretty gabled beach house where the owner Rini conducts astrology retreats. So like you could come and stay, and then like you get your personal readings, you can have readings with your spouse or your friends or whatever, and everything's like themed with astrology basically for these trips. And so 6 of them go out there. It's loosely connected to each other, like, oh, that's that person's friend and then his spouse, so they're connected enough. And 6 people go on this retreat, and basically we start finding out that everyone has secrets naturally.
Of course.
And you shift through 5 different POVs the whole time. And what I thought, and I told her, I just interviewed her yesterday. It's so hard to give 5 people complete character arcs, but she did it. And
That's
it's
amazing.
pretty cool. Yeah, and so like all of their secrets basically blow up in their face, and it's like watching what happens as that happens.
That's awesome. Okay, I can't wait to read that. That sounds great.
Yeah. And you kind of learn a little bit. I don't know tons about astrology, so you learn a little bit about it. It's not a spoiler, but what I thought this was so cool, the way she helps you like get to know the characters is like there's like their chart that the like host is looking at. So then you get to know the characters that way too.
That's really cool. I was wondering if she was going to play with that in there at all. And I love when people do that. That makes me think, not that everything goes back to my Egypt trip, but one thing we went to
right now it does.
Right? We went to one temple, I think it was Dendera, which was beautiful, but it has what they believe is the first ever zodiac, that they actually think it came out of ancient Egypt, because all of the creatures on the zodiac are actually associated with Egyptian gods. So they think that like the zodiac, which is technically Greek, but they think a Greek philosopher came to Egypt, saw this wheel, and used that as the template for the zodiac. Isn't that cool?
That is so cool.
Yeah.
You just have to just look at it.
Just casually, you know.
Like, hey.
It was amazing. Yeah, exactly. Like, what's up?
Yeah, it was cool though. And like she kind of does some cool stuff with like free will versus fate. And so we had some fun conversations.
That's
about
really
that.
cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh,
yeah.
My book list just grows and grows every time I talk with you, Kate.
I know. This is the danger of podcasting about books.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. And I have like so many. I just have so many I want to read lately. I want to have you The Last Party by A.R. I don't know if it's Tori or Tor.
I don't know.
Everyone's losing their minds about it.
I've heard good things too, and I haven't read it yet, but yes.
I need to read The Puzzle Box next. And then I think I might pick up The Last Party. We'll see. I also saw JT Ellison's new one is an Amazon first reads pick.
Oh, cool.
So I have that one too. And that one sounds so fun. Like the high concept of it all is that like, a murder writer is murdered like she was in one of her books, and then her daughter's trying to figure out who did it.
Love it. Love that.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah. I think that sounds like so much fun.
You just reminded me I need to check my Amazon first reads because maybe I'll pick that one too.
Yeah, and you can get 2 this month. You know how sometimes they randomly do that?
Yeah. Oh,
You can
good.
get 2.
So multiple arenas for me to just be like piling books on books on books.
Yeah, just get them everywhere.
Can I ask, how is writing going for you? We can cut this out of the podcast if you don't want to talk about it, but
no, you're good. It's not going bad. It's just going slow. We had so many car problems come up.
Oh no.
So we kicked it into gear with business, and thankfully the work showed up. So that has been the focus. Great. Because we had a car just completely stop working.
Oh no.
And it was not paid off yet. So there's just been a lot of that in the last 2 weeks. But I do feel like I got to kind of a fun spot. I don't know how to say with what, but some things are starting to like fall into place where I was like seeing how they're going to build to the ending. So that's like a good feeling.
Isn't that like a magical feeling when you're like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's and like, great. I feel like I got a grasp of, I think at this point I have a grasp of like all my characters where like when we did the writing challenge, that was when I had the realization that I just needed to write about this family from like Third Omniscient. And then it was like, okay, so now I know what my main character is headed into. And it like that helped a lot.
That's awesome. Oh, it's so exciting. I can't wait to read it.
I know. I want to get some more time because I do want to finish and I like feel like I have momentum, but
yeah,
it's been a lot of editing.
I get it. And that's like the hard part about being like, I don't know. I think that's reality for most writers, right? Is that like writing is not 100% your day job. Yeah. And so it's just like, sometimes it's hard to balance. Those people who like consistently turn out a book a year, I'm so impressed by, and also just like, how? Teach me.
Yeah.
How?
I know. I don't know how you do it and have a job. Like if it was the only thing you had to do, maybe.
Sure. Maybe. Even then though, like I think for me, what I've noticed about myself, and I don't know if you have similar experiences, but like it's a delicate balance. If I have too much time to work on something, I start to like collapse under the weight of like, I should be writing all the time and I'm not. And like, like it's almost like you have to have a balance between enough time to work on it, but not so much time that you can like get so in your head about it.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Bookwild. And if you are, could I ask you a favor? Could you go and rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening? Ratings and reviews make the biggest difference in discoverability of the podcast, and I definitely want to find all of our fellow thriller readers out there. So if you could go rate the podcast and leave a short review, that would make a huge difference. Thank you, and let's get back to the show. Sometimes having too much time, if you overthink, you just fill it with overthinking.
Totally. For sure. Or like Netflix, watching every single thing.
Or Netflix or TikTok.
Or TikTok. Oh God. TikTok. I'm trying to put myself on like, I've stepped away from TikTok a little bit just because it was like, it's the only one where I lose time, where like all of a sudden I'll look up and I've been like, I've been doing this for an hour? Like, what?
Yeah. Especially when Tyler's gone. I will do the same where like, I'll be like, I'll just scroll it and then I'll switch to my book. And then it's like an hour and a half later.
Right. And you're like, what happened? I just stepped into like a time wormhole. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little too good. The algorithm is too good.
The algorithm is too good. Mm-hmm. So should we talk about Strange Darling?
I think we should. We should try.
I think we should try too.
Yeah. Well, so we're gonna not spoil anything. I'll cut anything if we spoil stuff, so you guys can keep listening. But I know I mentioned it on like one other podcast, but I don't think I even talked about it much. So most people don't know how obsessively. It might have been just the one with you telling you to, or no, I texted you.
You texted me, and I was like you were just like, "Have you seen Strange Darling? You should go see it. Don't look up anything beforehand. Just go." And I was like, yes. Okay.
And I knew you were like on your way out of the country, and so I'm like, if you have time before you leave.
I like looked. There was like one showing I could get to before I left, but I was just like, I just don't like. I was like, I still have have to pack. And so, but it was like one of the first things I did when I came back was
oh, nice. So it was still in theaters when you got back. That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it sometimes with the like indie, because it was definitely an indie film, sometimes they're like only there for like 2 weeks and then they just disappear.
Totally.
So I didn't want you to miss it, but I'm glad you got to see it in theater.
It's so good. Yeah.
So what is the best? I mean, even trying to, you can try to do a summary as well. I maybe gonna look up what they say.
So here's a few things I'm going to say about it. Where I'm trying not to spoil anything. So the movie starts with like a crawl of words, and it basically says that I think in 2018 or 2019, the country's most prolific serial killer went on like a spree before being apprehended, and that's like a fictionalized story, or like that's the story we're about to see based on like reconstruction of what happened. And one thing that I think is really interesting about that is that I don't know about you, but I was pretty interested. I really enjoyed the movie. I didn't think it was always, I wouldn't say it was like a 100% perfect movie, but I really, really liked it. I thought it was beautifully shot, crazily well acted, really well done, like in a non-linear structure. But so I was so obsessed with it that I went, I started looking up articles afterwards. And one thing that I was curious about was like, was this actually based on any real serial killer? And the filmmakers have been very cagey about that. And it just is like, which honestly, I'm actually less interested in whether or not it's based on a true person and more what the idea that it might be kind of does to your viewing experience. Right. And like, I think that's always something that's interesting too in books, when somebody says something where it kind of blurs the lines between reality and not in this really interesting way. And I thought that was a very interesting part that they included with it. So
it's then like Fargo.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Where it's like,
they've just stuck with that. Yeah,
totally. And it's like Fargo, I think the OG, the movie was based on a case, but if you look it up, it's like pretty far from what actually happened in the movie. It's just like, there was a guy who murdered his wife in North Dakota. But then it's become like a hallmark of the show that they say that too. It's so interesting. It's like, it's almost like the movie or the TV show creating its own mythology. And like, where is that in real life? It's really cool. And it's set in Oregon. I think I can say that without it being any spoilers. So it's all these like beautiful, saturated, like one thing that they talked about in interviews that I read and that I noticed was that I feel like if you see a lot of thrillers now, they're kind of gray cast. Like everything is kind of gray and blue and feels very rainy and like desolate. This movie, is like beautifully in color, filled so much life. Bright red. So much bright red. The sunlight filtering through the trees. It's like a fairy tale. It's beautiful. Yeah. And I thought that really added to it too.
It does. It does.
I'm really talking around it.
I know, we just are. And like, so that after the text rolls, like this is the synopsis that they have for it. Nothing is what it seems when a twisted one-night stand spirals into a serial killer's vicious murder spree. We can tell you that. And we can tell you that the first scene, because it's what you would see in the trailer, the first scene is is it Micah Monroe? No, this isn't Micah Monroe.
It's that Willa, was Micah Monroe is from Longlegs. Her name is Willa something, and
I said it, I was like, wait a second.
Yeah,
Willa Fitzgerald.
Yes.
So like the opening scene is her like in like red scrubs, like nurse scrubs almost, with like blood dripping somewhere from her face. And she's like running kind of in slow motion out of the trees, basically. And there's a man eventually following her with a truck and a gun. So that's what it opens up with. But the really cool thing, and I have it in my notes because I took a lot of notes when I was watching this one because we were alone in the theater.
I love it.
I think it starts in chapter 3. The way that they actually handle it being nonlinear is really cool because Yeah, so chapter 3 is the first chapter. So then all of a sudden, like, we get into it and there's like a title card that says
Yeah.
chapter 3, can you help me please? And so we start on chapter 3, then you go to 5, then to chapter 1, chapter 4, chapter 2, and then chapter 6. So
Yeah.
like you bounce all around, and the thing that was so fascinating to me to think about is like how still within a 3-act structure, like
Yeah.
even being non-linear, all of the reveals to the audience fit in the right place, even though the story's out of order. So it's in like almost telling the story out of order is what makes the story so good and makes it work and hit all the beats.
You're totally right. I hadn't thought of that, but you're so right. It's like you can see very clearly, like, they don't cheat, right? Like, the story is, there's a version of the movie that you could watch chapter 1 to chapter 6 and it would all fit
Yeah,
together. But instead, they stagger the structure for a variety of reasons. And you're totally right. It still works like perfectly.
yeah.
Yeah.
The reveals to you, like at that midway point, you're like, what?
Totally. Okay, so
I loved it. I'm obsessed. I am, well, I'm having a hiccup attack right now.
oh
um, I am trying so hard to get connected to the director because he wrote it, the writer director. And I got connected to the writer director of Oddity, which I saw like the week before. And I really loved that. And so I interviewed him. That episode came out last week. But this JT Malner, who did Strange Darling, doesn't have an Instagram.
no.
He's just one of those cool people you just can't get in touch with.
One of those cool kids.
And I'm like, bro, I want to talk to you.
Totally. You'd have a great conversation with him. Okay, so
Yes.
I haven't listened to the whole episode yet, but I did see that you spoke with the director of Oddity, and
Yeah.
based on what you said about it and your conversation with him, I watched it last weekend with my friends.
Oh,
It
you
was
did?
so good. It was so
Isn't it
good.
so good?
Yes, it was so suspenseful, so weird.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
creature, the like
The wood?
yes, yes. Oh, it was so good. I was like screaming. At one point I did scream actually out loud. It's just like,
I don't blame you. If it
yeah.
was it the scene with the tent and the camera?
No, but that one was like, I
That
was
was
like, I had created, like, I had blocked everything so that I had like the smallest like angle that I could see that. I was just like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. What he did such a good job of, what the movie did such a good job of was like the suspense, like how long they dragged out that suspense, and like the opening setup is so fucking good because it's so creepy, where this man comes to the door of a woman who's staying alone in this like abandoned castle, and
it's
he's like,
so moody.
somebody's in there, you need to let me in there. And you're like, and he looks visibly kind of off. And so you're like, no, of course she's not going to let you in there. But then it like starts to shift and you're like, oh fuck, maybe there is someone in there. And it's like, it's
concerned. Yeah.
right. And you're like, you don't know if the danger is inside or outside. And it's like, ugh, it was so well done.
Yes, I loved it. I thought
I did too.
because it even used tropes, and he talks about that too. Like he has a lot of favorite tropes. It still feels like a really unique take on like and I talked to him about that too. It's like it is a whodunit. It's paranormal, it's horror,
Yeah.
it is like a textbook thriller too. There are twists, like I loved it so much. But that scene, the one where you were saying you like couldn't even look, that on our way to the theater. So I heard about this movie because of Film Joe, I think is his name on TikTok. There are two guys, or Cinema Joe on TikTok. He and someone else whose name I can't remember and I feel very bad are my favorite people that I get my movie news from. Okay. And so after we had seen Longlegs, which like we had that discussion about whether it was terrifying for you or just like fun to watch. Cinema Joe was like, I liked Longlegs, but this is the scariest movie I've seen this year and you need to go see it. And I was like, okay, we've got to go do it. And so on the way there, I was telling Tyler, I was like, I'm trying to think of like, because I was kind of nervous to go see something that scary in the theater. And I'm like, what is it that makes you just like that you couldn't even handle seeing it in public? So we were just talking about that. we sit there, the movie starts or whatever. We get to that scene, and again, it doesn't spoil anything for anyone, but the scene with a tent and a camera, and Tyler looks over at me and he's like, "This is terrifying."
Yes.
Yeah.
What they do,
it's terrifying.
There's a masterful job of drawing out the suspense moments, which I think is like so horror in particular. We all know the beats of it. You know what I mean? So it's like, like as soon as you see her taking pictures, setting up the camera to take pictures around, you're like, fuck, that's coming in. You know these things. Sorry, I've been really swearing a lot this.
Oh, I do too. Please do.
Thank you. They do such a masterful job of drawing it out, because it's almost like the principle of the movie Jaws, which is that like the more you see the shark, the less scary it is. So he does such a good job of like living in those moments where you don't know exactly what's coming. You just know that it is, and it's gonna be bad, and you're just like, please, like, just don't do it, Oh, but it's so good.
It is so good. I loved it. And I don't know if you guys can hear my dogs, but I don't think it's super loud if you do hear them. I rewatched it the morning before the interview, because it was like I saw it and then I interviewed him 6 weeks later, and thankfully it was on streaming. And it just so played out that we were just so busy with work that week that like I was like going to bed after I finished work. So I was watching this at like 4:30 in the morning. Because I was like, I'm just gonna have to wake up early. I can't bring myself to watch this right now at night. I'm exhausted. So I was watching it like 4:30, but that also meant it was like totally dark. So it was like watching it at night. I knew the things that were going to be happening, and I still like was flinching away from stuff. I was like, it's just that good.
It's good filmmaking, because it's like, again, like when I got to the end of it, there's a couple of things that were really unique about the movie, but a lot of it, like, oh, that sounds like I'm saying something bad, and I don't mean to be. It's playing with a lot of very familiar beats, but it does it so well that like the experience almost is more than the parts, to me, is how I felt about it, where it's like, and then there were a few truly original twists on it, but like again, it's the jump scares that are coming, but doing such a masterful job of holding it until the exact right moment, and just like letting that tension build. I was just like, oh, you get to a point where you're almost like, do it already, like just I can't live in this tension, like just do it.
Yes, I agree. Bruce has lots of feelings about it right now. No. So he's just breathing his hot air on me. I'm going to keep scratching his head. Maybe he'll stay quiet. But yeah, I loved everything he put together. And it was crazy hearing how much... Hold on.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, I think everyone should watch Oddity and Strange Darling, pretty much. They're two of my favorites of the year.
Yeah, I loved them. It was really fun. And I don't know, I was in the Strange Darling theater, and there were a bunch of interesting trailers coming up, and I was like, are the movies cool again? Because I feel like they
I think they have been this year. We've gone to a lot.
And the Baby Girl trailer with Nicole Kidman just dropped yesterday, and I've watched it 4 times already. It looks so good.
Girly needs to find someone who can make her wigs look real, though.
That is true. She needs a better wig master.
I'm like, these are big film sets.
I know.
But yeah, the story looks amazing.
The trailer just looks electric. It's like the same feeling I had of like coming out of Challengers and being like, I think I could punch somebody. Like, I'm so worked up, like I'm so into it.
Yes. Well, also a little bit out of character for me, but I love Aubrey Plaza. Like, just always love her. She's so cool. And she was all over my TikTok, because I have not broken my TikTok addiction. Promoting, she has a book. She has a movie called My Old Ass. It's not her movie, but she's in it. So she's been promoting it. And I was getting the vibes that it was like kind of funny from like the things that I saw. And so I told Tyler, like, I was like, I don't know, this might work for us. It is very funny too. Yeah. It's funny, it's heartwarming, it's heart-wrenching.
Okay.
When the movie ended, Tyler turned to me and said, "Don't get up. You don't have to get up. Like, we can wait. Like, get control of yourself." Aww. I was crying so hard for like the last like 10 minutes. Like, the kind where like, how if you're in public, well, you may not cry as much as I do though, but if you're in public and you're
I
like,
cry a fair
okay,
amount.
okay, it's pretty common for me at least to hit, if it's not like a straight action movie and there's a touching, earnest moment, my eyes are gonna like water a little bit. Like that is not uncommon for me. But then like there's where you're like, oh, I'm really gonna be crying, but like I'm really gonna like not try to like make a lot of noises while I do this, even though like I am crying.
Yeah.
My nose got so stuffed up because like the one time I tried to like sniff, it was so loud and there were snot bubbles in my nose. So I just started giving up and was just trying to like control the like massive like tears coming down, and I'm just like,
Aww.
it was beautiful and so sad, and also it will make you appreciate every single moment of your life, is what
Okay.
I can say. The
Okay.
gist of it is a bunch of 18-year-old girls. The main character, she's about to leave for college, and her family has this large cranberry farm, and like that's the whole world she's ever known. Very not in tone but in setting very similar to like Where the Crawdads Sing. Like she's
Oh
just
yeah.
like flying around on a boat, on
Mm.
like a little boat, because she's just always lived that way. So she's about to go to college. I think like 2 weeks away when we start the movie, and then she and her friends do mushrooms in the like forest and like camp out one night. And what happens for her is her future self shows up and starts talking to her, and she's like, you're my old ass, is like where that came from. So it's like the older version of her
Yeah,
starts
yeah.
talking to her and like telling her the things that like could make the summer more meaningful.
Mm.
And there is like, I would call it a reveal. This is not a thriller. There's a reveal though at the end that like I realized it like 10 minutes before it happened, and like already I was like, oh no, oh no.
Oh.
And then it hits and you're just like, oh my god. But
Okay, I
it,
gotta see it.
as much as it made me cry, it made me so appreciative of
Mm.
life in general. So
Mm.
it is a really powerful coming of age story.
Okay, I gotta see that one. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I've seen trailers for it. It does look funny. And
Yeah.
I'd heard like I'd read a few reviews of it that were pretty good, but like you're really selling me on it. I gotta see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Um,
very cool.
Speaking of Aubrey Plaza, that makes me think of I really am not involved in the MCU.
That's
I
where I
have
figured you were going.
but yeah, I don't really watch very much of the MCU content. I don't know, it just doesn't speak to me. I did
Yeah.
watch WandaVision and I've seen like scattered different things, but I started
Oh,
watching Agatha all
WandaVision.
WandaVision was great. And so I really liked that. So then I started
Mm-hmm.
watching Agatha all along and I'm now obsessed with it. I'm really into it. I love that it's like they're taking tropes from the Wizard of Oz and inverting them and being like very
Yes.
clever with those Easter eggs. And I know it's got its own story, but it just feels like I love it. And so it sounds like you're watching it too.
I'm not watching it because we just
Okay.
didn't have Disney, so I just need
Oh
to
yeah.
add it, is all I
Mhm.
really need to do. But it was also making me debate whether I should watch WandaVision again, because it's like so much a spinoff from that.
Yeah.
But that's another show. Whew. Just Tyler was gone when I watched that show for the
Oh
first time, and I didn't even know. Like I
yeah.
didn't even know that it was gonna hit you in the like grief spot so hardcore at the end.
Totally.
So I have been debating rewatching that or not, but I need to buy Disney, and it was crazy because I was thinking about it. I was like, do I have the time to get that worked up again?
Totally.
And then one of my friends, I'm going to keep this short cuz I don't want to cry. One of my friend's dogs died
Oh,
this
I'm so
week.
sorry.
Yeah. And I didn't even know the dog. I just know her. And then I just heard her retell the story of it happening on a podcast this morning. But then she referenced the quote from WandaVision that says, "What is grief but love enduring?" And I just lost it again. I was like, I don't think I need to rewatch it. I think I've still got it all in here.
I think that's fair. And I did not rewatch WandaVision, although I did watch
Okay.
it years ago when it came out.
Hmm.
And I think there were a couple of things where I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure that's a WandaVision reference and I'm just sort of
Yeah.
missing it. But like, I think you can watch it smoothly through
Nice.
without even having watched WandaVision. And it's like
Nice.
so good.
I want to start watching it.
It's
I
great.
think we
It's
can get it
very
through Hulu.
Yeah, it's very fun. It's like it's got
Yeah.
darkness to it, and maybe it'll have like WandaVision was very fun too until you realize like,
Yes.
and even fun throughout, but you realize you're right at the end. The project is like grief and coming to
You're
terms
like,
with
oh,
grief, and it's like
yeah.
this heavier thing. And I suspect we might not be doing that, but it's like it's
Yeah.
so fun, female driven, like amazing
Mhm.
actresses who are cast in it, and it's just like, yeah, it feels like a dark inversion of the Wizard of Oz, and I'm like so here for that.
I've got to watch it. I've been seeing clips, so like I
Yeah,
know I need to watch it. I just need to
yeah,
add the Disney add-on.
totally.
I definitely need to pick it up.
It's a
You
good
don't
one.
watch much reality TV, right?
Okay, I have watched, what did I watch recently? I am
Mhm.
I did watch Chimp Crazy, and I
Oh
watched
yeah.
The Secret Lives of TikTok Wives, of Mormon Wives, Secret
Mormon watch,
Lives.
so did I.
Yes.
Wow.
That was a thing. And then yeah, so that's what I've watched recently.
Yeah, I haven't watched Chimp Crazy yet. I've been debating that one, but I had one of the coolest things is when I just have a bunch of photos to edit so I can have just like TV on while I'm
Mm-hmm.
working. And so like because I just had so many photos 2 days in a row, I like finished Secret Lives of Mormon Wives in like 2 days.
Goes down real smooth, just like right
Yeah,
through them. And
it
those ladies.
was I come from it's actually very similar religious repression. Like
Mhm.
extremely similar if I'm being honest. Like there's more where like with Mormon faith, like the women can't do any of the blessings as you saw, like the
Yep.
baptisms and stuff. And also, I did not realize you women are not allowed into heaven unless they have a husband. So there are
Oh,
some of those things that
yeah.
weren't the same, but the judginess, the like extreme, like, oh, we're in our 20s and we're scared if our parents know that we drink, like the
Mhm.
sexual repression, like all of that, I was like, I'm really glad that I'm not in that anymore.
For sure. And I felt like all of that was part of what made, so the show kind of follows, you know, honestly, you could do a drinking game of like, will Mom Talk even survive this? And
Will it even survive?
you would be dead. Your liver would have exploded. But like, it kind of follows like these group of women, and one of the ringleaders of it, and the one who arguably was most famous before the show because of her TikTok drama, is Taylor
Mhm.
Frankie Paul. And I found her to be rather messy in her
Yeah.
decision making, but ultimately very easy to root for because, like, you
Yes.
see her family, and, like, basically, this is someone for whom the, like, small repressive box of this Mormonism religion, just not to say that it's that way for everyone, but it seemed to be for her,
Yes.
clearly isn't working for her. And the people who like love her and should be on her side are basically just like, get back in the box. She'll be happy in the box. The box is good. We love the box. Get in the box. And you're like,
Yes.
she exploded her life at 25 because the box wasn't working. Like, why do we think it would? So
Exactly.
it was just very empathetic to watch her try to
Yes.
navigate like her loving close ties, and also like, but I don't want to live this life exactly this way anymore. I
I
thought it
know.
was very,
I thought
that
the
it felt
same
very
thing.
human.
Yes, I
Yeah.
feel like there might have been others that were still being pretty honest, but it felt like she's very honest and actually knows who she is, even the mistakes
Yes.
she's made. And that's
Totally.
what matters to me more than if you make mistakes. It's just like how do you handle it after? And she was kind of the only one who'd be like, "Yeah, that was me. I fucked up."
Right.
Like,
Totally.
I love that about her, and I
I
listened to her on
agree.
a podcast that she was on now, and so, like, most of that was happening 2 and 1.5-ish years ago before it
Hmm.
came out now, and I listened to her on Vile Files, and you can hear if you're someone who's been in therapy or, like, just done work on self-talk and shame and all of that, you can hear how much she's worked through and how
Totally.
much, like, good for her that she didn't marry him. Like, good
Yes.
for her that everyone was telling her to do it. She couldn't bring herself to leave him until recently. She did.
Oh, she did. Good
Um,
for her.
but I'm so proud of her because everyone, including him, was like, "Why would you not?" And she's like, "Because it's not right yet."
And I was listening to a podcast. So part of the joy for me of watching stuff like this, like obviously is the watching of it, but then I love to like go to podcasts or like I love a think piece article that's
You and
like
me
4,000
too.
words long. Yeah. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
give me all the deep dive stuff about it. And people were pointing out how, I mean, it is really uncomfortable. There's this whole situation that arises with her and her boyfriend, and they are pregnant, and he's basically pressuring her to get married. And she like could not be saying any more clearly, I'm not ready. And then also I'm like 8 3/4 months pregnant. I'm about to deliver like any day. I'm too tired. I can't talk about this. I can't keep having this fight. And he just doesn't hear it. And the like emotional abuse of it, of sort of just being like,
I
you
mean,
gotta do it. You gotta do it. You gotta do it. And it just is like, bruh. And like, I know it's a TV show. I know it's cut to look a certain way, but like, I don't know. It's pretty hard to watch her just like tears rolling down her face, just being like, I'm
so
tired.
bad.
Yeah, it was
I
so
was
sad.
texting my friend Steph, and I was like, I'm watching the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And I was like, first of all, these men suck. Like, they are terrible. And then I was like, but then one of them is 8 months pregnant. And this man is being one of the most annoying men on earth. And she is somehow not like murdering him.
I know.
I was like, if I am 8 months pregnant, you better not look at me weird.
I agree. I mean, the men are a real study in no
Jen's
thanks
husband
on that show. Is the worst. Is the worst.
Was insanity. Saying he was going to leave her.
She didn't even stay for the Chippendales show, which I was like, girl, at least enjoy the sin. Like, if you're going to be called a sinner.
He was gambling.
With her money.
With her money. And do you know, did they cover it in the show, or did I find this out later? His parents gave him $100,000 so that he could go through medical school, and he blew it all on gambling.
Yep.
And he has the nerve to tell her what to do.
I know. They don't say the amount in the show, but they do say that. They basically say, like, she at one point says to her friends, like, her parents gave us a nest egg and, like, it's gone now. And, like,
yeah,
the way that she's earning money is TikTok content and supporting her family. And he basically acts like it's a joke. And I'm like, okay, well, what better options are you offering? Because, like, I don't see any. He's the worst. And I love that the internet rose up in like pettiness and like looked it up and were like, actually, he's not related to Ben Affleck. So go fuck yourself. Like,
yes, that too. You're
awesome.
like, no, you're not.
I love it.
We're going to call all your bluffs.
Yeah, like, no.
Oh, man. The episodes 7 and 8 were wild. Were just unhinged.
Yes, it really was.
Oh
it really was. And then they left us on that cliffhanger with Macy calling Jenna and being like, did you sleep with Dakota? And then it's like, oh, this conversation. And I was like, oh, wait, they have to come back.
I know. It's got to get picked up. It was everywhere. I feel like so many husbands were watching it with their wives. I was seeing like they would get sucked into it.
I made my roommate watch it.
Though.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I would say is like it's not total escapism reality TV, because and maybe if you grew up around religious stuff it would feel sadder, and maybe it doesn't if you didn't, but it is sad. It's sad seeing the way that church treats women, especially, basically.
It's sad seeing the way the church treats women. For me, what I was really struck by was the deep entwining of like patriarchy and capitalism that shows up in it too. That like these women are, most of them, if not all of them, are the breadwinners in their family, which is like awesome and rock on.
Yes.
But the way that causes conflict in their relationship, and then also the way that they have become breadwinners by essentially performing their patriarchal roles is also really interesting, where they kind of act like they're really subverting something. And I'm like, well, on the one hand, you kind of are, but on the other hand, you're like entrenching, like you're like reinforcing these like extreme gender roles.
Only value.
Yeah. And like, and that, you know, they all look very similar, you know, I don't necessarily want to go into the whole Whitney of it all, because I feel like that's like a whole nother conversation, but she's the only one, you know, confident enough to rock a bob and not have the like long hair waves.
Like Utah curls.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating, this sort of like them being like, we're strong women, we're showing women that there's another way. And I'm like, the
I
other way
know.
looks a lot like the way that the patriarchy tells us, though. Like, you all have
I
kids at
agree.
like 22. Like,
We have
I don't know.
so many kids. That's what I was seeing commentary on, that like
Yeah.
there are women who are like married and have multiple children, but also to most of us, it kind of feels like watching high schoolers like
Yeah.
who snuck away from their parents so there's like this part of their life where they feel way older than me, and then
Totally.
they're not. I'm
Right.
32 and these are like 22-year-olds or 25-year-olds with 3 kids.
Right.
We just glossed over Michaela getting married at 16 to a man who's
Ugh.
21.
Ugh.
Just glossed right over that part.
Yeah, I have a couple of like legal questions I want to ask about
Same.
some of these things. But I'm with you.
Because
There's
if the internet's to be trusted, he got her pregnant when she was 15. She had the baby at 16.
oh god, oh god,
Ugh.
and then I guess it's
Yeah,
fine
so
because they got married. So,
yeah, it's
um,
different. It's different than other reality TV. That's all I'm trying to say.
yeah, and but I'm with you. Every fight they have in the show feels like a middle school fight to me. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
like, oh, these women are very developed in certain areas of their life and really underdeveloped in others. And like the way that their like ability to deal with conflict for most of them, and like the conflict that happens, feels so young and so immature. It's kind of fascinating to watch and just be like, wow, this is a fight? Like, oh,
I know.
okay.
Yeah. Right. And the whole like division of like the good Mormons and the bad Mormons,
and
the sinners and the
like
saints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the terrible soda orders where I'm like, I think God would rather you just drink your coffee. Like, this is like against, like, this is ungodly. What you're doing to that Dr. Pepper is like, no, thank you.
I saw a comment that was like, nobody loves finding loopholes more than someone who's like totally committed to adhering to every rule of their religion.
Totally. And then it's like, God doesn't want us to put toxins in our bodies, but we do get Botox and we do get laughing gas when we do it.
We get
It's like
laughing gas.
And I was like, what? Like, you're 22 and you're getting face full of Botox, but like, and again, I actually like, and then it puts you in the uncomfortable position. I don't want to judge these women's choices. Do whatever you want with your body, but it's the sort of like holding it up as like, we adhere to all these beliefs in this very specific way. And then also like being like, but this, and this. And like,
I know.
We're not supposed to have sex out of wedlock, but we do have soft swinging parties because like we didn't get to date a lot of people when we were younger. And you're like,
and they use it as an excuse. Yeah.
Like, it's so weird.
I know. It is the proof that repression does not work out in the long run.
No, and it ultimately leads to the real horror of like a Diet Coke filled with half and half, which is like, what? No, thank you.
With coconut cream.
Oh my God, those drink orders. Whitney. Okay, I don't want to spoil it for anybody but what Whitney does to a cake later in the season when I've never seen anything. Didn't even click for her that might be fucking disgusting. Like, I've never seen anything so low-key gross in my life. I was just like, oh God.
I like was watching while I was working, and so I kind of missed something of that scene. And so I thought it was just in a bag and she was showing it to people. And then I heard, but you put it in the cake. And I was like, all right, we need to skip back 30 seconds here. What just happened? And then I was like,
yeah,
what?
It's disgusting. It's disgusting. I listened to one podcast that had a theory about Whitney, and it said their theory was, they were like, I think Whitney and Hillary Clinton suffer from the same thing, which is that when they were young, someone told them their personality was too much and wrong. And so since then, they have been trying to approximate what they see around them, but they can't do it right. So they don't understand and like, I don't know if that's true or not. That was that one person's take, but you certainly see it in Whitney's stuff where she'll do things like dancing with her baby in the emergency room when he has RSV and being like, it's meant to be a celebratory moment, but like doesn't clock how it looks from the outside, which is that it looks insane and like you're a bad mom. And I'm not here to mom shame anybody, but like it looks bad.
No,
or like
it's a weird choice.
Or I guess I'm just gonna ruin it, but like putting
I can cut it
the
too.
actual pee stick of your
Yes.
pregnancy test in a cake and not being
In a
like, that
cake.
might be gross for people. And she was just like, it's
Yeah.
fine. I put the cap on, I Cloroxed it. And you're like, it's still urine adjacent. Like, that shouldn't be in that cake. Like, no way.
No.
Oh.
But take a picture of it and put it in a plastic bag or something.
Right. Put it in like a ring box or something where people don't have to, one, touch it, or if they're going
Consume
to,
it.
right, like if they're gonna touch it, like they can wash their hands afterwards. Like, don't put it somewhere where it's like, I wonder which part of the cake, my cake, this was touching the pee stick. Like, oh,
Yes.
that's so
Yes.
gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wild show.
It really is. It really is a wild, wild show, and I hope there's a season 2.
I do too. I need it. There in some of their TikToks, there are camera crews in the mirrors people noticed. So people kind of think they're filming right now for season 2.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so.
I'm invested.
I'm invested too.
Yeah.
Well,
we just talked about a little bit of everything.
We really did.
Like
and I was gonna say I should probably start wrapping it up, but it's always such a joy to talk to you, Kate. I have such fun in our conversation.
Me too. Yeah. We just consume so much similar stuff.
We really do. We really do. And I love that. It makes it really fun to get to like riff off each other with. So.